vascular malformations is an abnormally formed channel lined by quiescent endothelium. Although they are congenital, they are not obvious at birth. They present only during the adolescent age group, and usually they never regress and often expand. Coming to the classification of vascular malformations, it is slow flow and fast flow. Slow flow comprises of capillary, lymphatic, and venous, and fast flow is arteriovenous malformation, and combined AV malformation. 1968, Holman gave us the most important contribution to understanding of these lesions, in which a proximal AVM causes significant shunt, may lead on to high output cardiac failure, and distal shunting, on the other hand, causes significant reduce in the flow rate and ischemic pain, and which are without adversely affecting the cardiac output, which occurs in the limbs. So a multidisciplinary approach is needed to manage these vascular malformations, which angioradiology plays an important role, and followed by surgical excision. We studied around 71 patients of vascular malformation treated in our department during the period of June 2014 to May 2020. Which comprises of head and neck cases 31, upper limb 25 cases, and malformation of lower limb 15 cases. The common presentation of these patients were in the age group of 10 to 12 years, adolescent age group, and they with equal sex distribution. The symptoms the patient presented to us were severe pain over the vascular malformation, either in the head and neck or in the limbs, and swelling and deformity was there with the recurrent bleeding from the lesions and ulceration from the lesions, either in the head and neck or in the lower, upper or lower limbs. The signs we see is usually the pulsatile swelling and compressibility of the AV malformations, and usually the patient tenderness over the swelling, warmth, thrill, bruit were there in the Schobinger stage 4 AV malformations. So what the preoperative investigations, although we do all the routine investigations, we give stress upon usually the hemoglobin PCV, blood grouping and typing, PT-INR, BT-CT platelet count is done to rule out any blood dyscrasias. And whenever we go in for surgery, plan for surgery, we reserve adequate blood and we make sure there's a tourniquet by clamp flow seal. And usually the pre-operative consent is got from the patient, either a need for tracheostomy whenever it involves the tongue, and pre-operative workup, we do all these investigations. And the investigation to confirm the diagnosis, we do usually the MRI contrast, that is a gadolinium scan to assess the flow characteristics of the lesion, abnormal channels and extent of involvement in tissue planes. This is the MRI picture showing the vastus medialis involvement, T2 hyperintense lesion over the vastus medialis muscle. CT contrast usually differentiates lymphatic venous or lymphatico-venous types, and capillary malformations are better seen with CT, and phleboliths are better seen in CT, as well as intraosseous vascular malformations and bony erosions are better delineated in CT scan. CT angiogram, usually we prefer for superselective embolization and to access the feeders. Coming to the modality of management, depending on the stage and location of the AV malformation, various management options are: we treat cases head and neck with foam sclerotherapy alone, or foam sclerotherapy with surgical excision, or superselective embolization followed with excision within 72 hours. And embolization, excision is skin cover. Skin cover usually we plan whenever the skin involvement is there with ulceration, we can't preserve the skin. So we plan for skin cover. So coming to head and neck vascular malformations, foam sclerotherapy we prefer usually for small lesions. For a huge lesion involving head and neck, pre-surgical selective embolization followed with excision. And limbs, usually we prefer doing a primary surgical excision under tourniquet control, and foam sclerotherapy for residual lesions. What are the advantages, disadvantages of sclerosins? Usually we prefer sodium tetrahydrosyl sulfate 3%, which is 2 mg per kg body weight. We prefer because it doesn't affect the normal vascular endothelium and there is no side effects. And so STS we use instead of polydaconal, which affects the cardiac, it does a cardiac depressant activity. And absolute alcohol also gives nerve injuries as well as skin blisters. So we prefer STS for foam sclerotherapy. This is the video showing how to prefer foam sclerotherapy and intralesional injection, in which first 1 ml of sodium tetrahydrosyl sulfate is taken with 5 ml of air, and then load, and we make it into foam sclerotherapy and foam, and we inject into the lesion. The purpose of advantage of foam is it will retain into the lesion, and which acts locally, and gives a fibrosis of the lesion. Super selective embolization is given for high flow AV malformations, in which it occludes the vessels to reduce the intraoperative bleeding, and the embolization was achieved with cyanoacrylate glue, microcoils, polyvinyl alcohol foam, and gel foam. Gel foam is a temporary, it acts only for 40 to 72 hours. Polyvinyl alcohol particles and microcoils, cyanoacrylate glue is a long-acting embolization agents. These are the embolic agents, NBCA glue and gel foam. This is the video showing AV malformation of the right cheek, in which you can see the dilated internal maxillary artery with AV blush with multiple AV fistulas. And then this is the post-embolization video showing occlusion of the nidus with AV, with a blockage of the nidus. Coming to case discussion on head and neck. Usually, preoperative planning is needed, as it's a cardinal principle of surgical treatment to give a good post-operative outcome. Step-by-step plan of resection, including approach, and we assess the involvement of the structures. And intraoperative decision-making is a must, and avoid all inadvertent injury to the neurovascular structures. And all these patients, post-op ICU monitoring is a must. And this patient was treated only with foam sclerotherapy, in which a small AV malformation, vascular malformation involving the lower lip mucosa, in which we gave foam sclerotherapy, STS, 3 doses. Every 3 weeks interval, we gave this, and after 4 doses, the lesion subsided. This boy had a recurrent bleeding and ulceration from the venous malformation over the tongue, in which he was not preoperatively, he was not able to close his mouth, and he had macroglossia. And then after 3 doses, the lesion subsided and got strength, and he was able to close his tongue. Although we give foam sclerotherapy in these cases, we take a preoperative consent for tracheostomy, and patient was intubated by nasal intubation, and post-operatively patient was, because of the foam sclerotherapy, there was edema of the tongue, and so post-operatively we was maintained on TPs for 2 days, and then only we extubated. All the 3 times we did the same procedure. Now he was able to close his mouth, and the bleeding ulceration also stopped. We are planning to debulk the tongue after corona period. This is a case treated with foam sclerotherapy and the excision. Actually, the patient was given foam sclerotherapy 4 doses elsewhere outside, and he came to us for residual lesion over the left cheek, for which we gave repeated foam sclerotherapy every 3 weeks for 4 doses, and we excised the specimen. But although foam sclerotherapy was also given, we encountered with blood loss, and with only bipolar diathermy and cauterization, we controlled the bleeding, and this is a post-operative result. 4 years follow-up. This 7-year-old girl presented to us with a huge swelling on the left face, proptosis, and pain in the left eye since 4 years, with recurrent bleeding from the left eye. She was also treated with sclerotherapy elsewhere for 6 months. But since the embolization, she had intracranial extension of the vascular malformation, and so interventional radiologist told us it was risky to give embolization, so we proceeded with foam sclerotherapy over the periorbital region, and enucleation of the left eyeball done. This is the end. You can see the entire orbit was studded with pulsatile vascular malformation. This lady, she presented to us with recurrent ulceration bleeding from the vascular malformation of the scalp region, which the feeders were from branches of the superficial temporal artery and branches on the occipital artery, and same was embolized. You can see the picture showing hyperintense contrast images, and the skin was involved in the AV malformation. We couldn't preserve the skin, and we proceeded with excision and SSG, well settled SSG. This lady, she presented to us with the AV malformation of the ear. Almost she was having this for past 15 years, in which it was involving the scalp and the right side of the neck. You can see the video, high pulsatile AV malformation. Pulsatile AV malformation. The nidus was measuring around 11 into 12 into 4.8 centimeters with the feeders from the branches of external carotid artery, namely the superficial temporal artery and occipital artery, posterior auricular artery, middle meningeal artery. And so we took her for surgery. This is the MRI picture showing the contrast enhanced lesion over the left ear, and this is the HP report. Perioperatively, we encountered with the help of vascular surgeon, we took control of the external carotid artery and excised the involved cartilage as well as the infected wound, and we put an excision and SSG, well settled SSG. This was vascular malformation involving the dorsum of the nose with recurrent bleeding from the nose, and she's an 18-year-old girl. And so we excised the specimen and we excised the lesion as well as we planned for a median forehead flap cover. This is the case managed with embolization and excision. In this case, the feeders were from the occipital artery. Both the occipital artery was embolized, and we took her for surgery and excision and skin closure. This is the vascular malformation of frontoparietal temporal region and involving the supraorbital region, in which we took this patient for surgery in 2 stages. First stage, we debulked the vascular malformation of the scalp, and second stage, we did the supraorbital region. You can see the contrast enhanced MRI involving the lesion. This boy had an hypertrophy of the right maxilla with the vascular malformation of the right cheek with the excision and the excised specimen. The patient was referred for orthodontic treatment. This was the AV malformation involving the masseter muscle, in which the patient had a pulsatile swelling in Schobinger stage 3, in which embolization was done and the feeders were embolized, and we excised the specimen. Actually, preoperatively, we cannulate the parotid duct as well as the facial nerve branches were preserved, and this is the 4 years follow-up with no recurrence. This was an high flow AV malformation in the neck and trapezius muscle. You can see actually he was also operated elsewhere, and he came with a residual lesion over the trapezius region and presented with severe pain. So this is the picture showing intense vessels, dilated vessels over the supraclavicular region and suprascapular region, and the feeders from the subclavian artery. This is the intraoperative picture and excised specimen of trapezius muscle. Coming to upper limb, usually we follow certain protocol for the excision of the upper limb vascular malformation with the pneumatic tourniquet, and the incision we plan and with the fine surgical instruments, we identify and tag the important structures like artery with the vascular loop red, vein with the blue, and nerve with the yellow vascular loop. And after the excision, immobilization with the POP and follow-up of the patient with done. This is a high flow AV malformation of the left hand forearm involving the median nerve. This child is a 10-year-old presented to us with Schobinger stage 4 with high output cardiac failure, and we stabilized the patient and took him for surgery. And you can see the entire median nerve was involved and the median nerve was sacrificed. And this is the final septal suture line. This is a venous malformation involving the wrist and the hand. But the ulnar nerve was normal and preserved the ulnar nerve, and only the vascular malformation was excised. This is the vascular malformation. It's a 10-year-old girl presented to us with swelling and pain over the right wrist and distal forearm since 2 years, and she was evaluated and taken up for surgery. And we could, perioperatively, we could see that vascular malformation, there was an extensive vascular malformation involving the fat fascia, paratenon, and joint capsule. And interosseous membrane was also involved, and you can see the bone involvement, the second picture. And post-operatively, she had stiffness of the MCP joints on the hand, and intensive physiotherapy was started to get full range of movements. This was a vascular malformation involving the dorsum of the hand, in which you can see the deformity. Peroperatively, we could find only the subcutaneous tissue as well as the dermis, extensive dermal involvement of this venous malformation, which was excised. The fascia, where small venous malformation was excised, and the skin encountered some necrosis. So we excised the necrosed skin, and the SSG was done, the second stage. This girl had a vascular malformation over the volar aspect as well as dorsal aspect. We proceeded with debulking of the tumor involving the flexor digitorum profundus and FPL muscle. A partial involvement was there, and we excised this lesion. And we planned for the second stage, dorsal excision, the second stage. This is the excised specimen. This lady is a 35-year-old female who presented to us with extensive involvement of vascular malformation of the dorsum of the hand and the ring finger, in which there's a subcutaneous tissue involvement, and we excised, and primary closure of the skin was done. This is the AV malformation involving the first web space and the thenar region. You can see the extensive vascular malformation, and it was excised. And this is the final suture line. And you can see the phleboliths in the MRI picture, multiple phleboliths. This was the 7-year-old boy presented to us with the vascular malformation over the left hand, involving the left hand palm, thenar region and the palm. And we preserved the vascular structures, neurovascular bundle going to the index finger and the thumb. And this is the well-settled suture line. Coming to the lower limb, this is a vascular malformation involving the gluteus maximus muscle. This patient also was operated elsewhere, the scar, and operatively we could, this is an MRI picture, contrast enhanced lesion involving the gluteus maximus muscle. Is a well settled scar, post-operative scar. And she is a 12-year-old female. She was also operated elsewhere once, and she came with intensive pain and myalgia over muscle pain over the thigh, and evaluated and diagnosed as vastus medialis muscle was studied with vascular malformation, and there was excised and final suture line. This boy had an anterolateral aspect of the leg involvement with the venous malformation, in which you can see the dermal involvement, extensive dermal involvement, and hypertrophy of the subcutaneous tissue, which was excised, and skin encountered peroperatively. We excised the skin also because of the involvement of the dermis, and we excised and put an SSG. This was a vascular malformation involving the ankle region, in which you can see the malformation, and it was excised and closed. This was there's an extensive. This is vascular malformation involving the dorsum of the foot and the great toe. Verrucous lesion is seen, and which was excised, and free radial forearm flap done, well settled flap. Since it was all the tendons were exposed and it was entering into the web spaces, we excised it and put a flap, free flap. Free surface with free flap. This lymphaticovenous malformation is a 3-year-old female presented to us with a swelling over the swelling deformity over the calf region and the anteromedial aspect of the leg, which extensive cystic dermal involvement was there, and since dermal involvement was there, the skin encountered some problem, and it was spontaneously settled. This is an excised specimen. You can see the MRI picture showing the extensive involvement of the lesion. Although this patient had a vascular lesion over the gingivobuccal surface, for which embolization was done, and she encountered tongue necrosis and following embolization. So we excised the necrotic part, and And this vascular malformation involving gingiva sulcus was given foam sclerotherapy alone, 3 doses, after which lesion disappeared. So although complication during surgery is bleeding, though blood loss is said to be less following embolization, bleeding is very significant during excision, and surgeon must be aware of this fact. Usually we use examination and proper tourniquet application is a must for all these upper and lower limb cases. And effective spray mode diathermy, biclamp application, and flow seal is to facilitate hemostasis. Coming to complications, superficial skin necrosis along the suture line, 3 cases, and managed debridement and SSG. There was a uncontrolled bleeding from the bone in 1 case, in which pack was kept and removed after 5 days with no further complications. Although we routinely reserve a minimum of 2 units of blood, but transfusion was required only in 2 cases. This is a complication where the skin was debrided and SSG was done. So wait and watch is never a good option. Primary surgical excision with removal of nidus and preservation of vital structures is possible. Head and neck large channel vascular malformation, embolization followed by excision, and small sized vascular malformation, foam sclerotherapy is safe. In limb vascular malformation, excision and early aggressive physiotherapy under good tourniquet control is better. And in residual lesions, we give foam sclerotherapy. I thank my professor, and special thanks to Professor G. Karthikeyan and Professor N.C. Hariharan, who were instrumental in starting this department, and have been continuing it. Thank you, sir. Over to sir, Professor Ashish Gupta.
Thank you. Thank you, Valarmati. Very good presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, you have shown a lot of variety of the cases. Venous malformation to AVM.
Yes,
What's
sir.
your, see, someone has asked also in chat.
1 minute, sir. Madam, can you please stop sharing your screen, madam?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Stop sharing.
Yeah, okay. Yes, sir. Over to you, sir.
Dr. Valarmati,
yes, sir.
Someone has asked in chat whether
sir.
you are doing a D-dimer and fibronism for venous malformation.
We don't do, sir. Here we don't have the facility of D-dimer estimation.
Okay. And what's your recurrence rate in cases of AVM?
AVM, only two cases had a recurrence, residual lesion actually, and then we proceeded with foam sclerotherapy. It got subsided, sir. Lesion.
Okay, this is very good. Very good presentation.
Sir. Thank you, sir.
Karthikeyan, can I put a little bit very short presentation?
Yes,
very
sir.
Short.
You can share your screen, sir.
Yes.
Sir? Sir, you have started sharing your screen, sir?
Just 1 second. Just a second.
Okay.
Can you see now?
Yes, sir, we can.
So I thought I'll put few slides. The problem of vascular anomalies start with the incorrect nomenclature and misdiagnosis, which creates a real havoc when the people refer cases to other centers. And that very good, Dr. Valarmati just followed the ISWA classification. We should follow that classification only. We should not use old terms like cavernous hemangiomas, etc. See, venous malformation, what new thing is happening is a lot of emphasis is on localized intervascular coagulopathy. That patients presenting with the fibrillate and pain. And this patient should be identified and helped, and especially if you are doing any surgery or sclerotherapy, then it's very important to check these things. And what are the risk of localized intravascular coagulation is when vascular malformation is more than 10 centimeters square, is a multifocal and palpable phleboliths are there and muscle involvement is there. That's very important. If we see in last 10 years, the maximum work is on these things. The other thing what we have to remember that many times venous malformation, we should not think about complete removal of the disease. It's better to think about relieving the patient symptom. That should be the goal. And if possible, we can treat those things conservatively also. That's I mentioned about LIC and D dimer. Someone has asked if D dimer is 3 times and patient is presenting with the pain, then he should be put on the low molecular weight heparin. And if D dimer is more than twice and patient is going and for any sclerotherapy or surgery, then patient should be put on the low molecular weight heparin 10 days before and should continue for 10 days after. That's a very important thing to identify these patients and help. That these things can decrease the bleeding during surgery also. Now that, see, Velarmati has shown that sclerotherapy, and what she has shown, it's look like interlesional. Now, if you want to have a good result with the sclerotherapy, then we have to take help of our radiologists, and we have to aim for intralesional sclerotherapy. Like if you put on the Google and type interlesional sclerotherapy, you'll not get even single article that immediately it will prompt you intralesional is a correct word. And same thing if you do PubMed, same thing, warning will come, you are using a wrong term. Everywhere. So like you'll not find enough evidence on interlesional. So it's always better to take help of radiologists if you want to achieve a good result. And put interlesional. What it means is, see, in interlesional, that sclerotherapy or STS is injected between the plexus, in between. It's not injected in the vessels. This is not recommended now. If we want, again, I'm saying repeatedly, we have to think about like Modi ji statement, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. We have to take help of the radiologists, and development of any specialty take place if you take help of other specialty. And we should give some space to radiologists about this. And in CMC, we always go for interlesional. We identify the vein, or radiologists identify the vein and inject that foam under vision in the venous malformation. That gives a good result. Last 15 years, we are hardly using interlesional sclerotherapy. We are using intralesional. Then one thing is very important, which recently we are using it for intractable venous malformations. Sirolimus, we have till now put only 3 patients on sirolimus. The literature says it can help you in an intractable where you can't do surgery, is too big. Only thing is that those patients have not come for follow-up because of COVID. Once they come, I'll update you on these things. The second thing about this arteriovenous malformations, see, treatment is major challenge. Incomplete resection or embolization or sclerotherapy alone or in combination is associated with high recurrence. You'll be shocked, it is a 5% within 5 years. It's very high recurrence rate. And treatment options are like a surgery alone, super selective embolization and surgery, sclerotherapy, percutaneous sclerotherapy and embolization, venous outflow. Here, I want to tell, if registrars are listening, in AVM, the word sclerotherapy should be used only if you are using alcohol. It should be differentiated from the embolization. Sclerotherapy can be used in AVM to almost cause that sclerosis of the channels, but then is a alcohol. Otherwise, we should use term very carefully whether we are aiming embolization or sclerotherapy. And embolization should be super selective. We should tell our radiologists many times when we notice, like suppose there's a scalp AVM, they'll embolize near the carotid or proximal part of superficial temporal. Most of the times, partial part of superficial temporal. The aim should be to go as near as possible to the nidus. The first chance is the best chance for AVM. Complete excision of nidus is almost like they say, like is like a head and neck tumor. It should be like outside, like extracapsular excision of nidus is must if you want to decrease the recurrence rate. Use all possible technique to eradicate AVM completely. Embolization alone is not enough, which many times is propagated by radiologists, but it's alone is not enough. So it's like a carpet bombing. If you want to do it, do all possible things. Embolize from the arterial side, embolize from the vascular side, and give interlesional sclerotherapy, means inject percutaneous embolization into the AVM, and then after 2 days, or many times we do on same day, do a extracapsular excision. Then only we'll get a good result. That one slide on Klippel-Trenaunay syndrome, that there is a very commonly seen. We must look for embryonal vein on the left lateral side. If embryonal vein is present, we should put patient on thromboembolic prophylaxis, and we should think about to decrease the incidence of embolization in future. Excision of this vein if deep venous system is competent. That's all. We can open for the question and other thing. Dr. Karthikeyan, we can open for the questions. Yeah. Hello? Oh.
Sir, yes, the chat box is open. There are questions. You can direct the questions either to Valarmadi or you can answer the questions, sir. Sir, you are muted, sir. I'll just...
What I feel,
Yes,
Valarmati, if you want, you can take first. And if there's a problem, I'll come into.
Okay, sir. Yes, sir. So what is the role of conservative management and pressure garments in venous malformation? When it is a small venous malformation, less than 3 centimeters, we can give foam sclerotherapy alone. And it's a big, in extremities, we can advise compression garments also, sir. Sir, you can
I agree with Valarmati. For small and for very big also, we can offer, again, we have to do D-dimer and fibronectin. If that's there, we have to relieve the pain by giving a low molecular weight heparin. And that what you said is correctly, that in these conditions, pressure garment can be of great use. And we should not deprive patient from these things. So D-dimer and fibronectin level and pressure garment, if it's not possible to exercise, or it's too, you can say, big and cause morbidity, then it's better to go for pressure garment and that low molecular weight.
You can take up the next question, madam.
Sir, it's not coming in my screen, sir.
Okay, I'll read the question. Some say to avoid sclerotherapy, dangerous area of face due to the theoretical chance of spread to the sagittal sinus. What are your views, madam?
Regarding intracranial vascular malformations, we don't deal, sir. Only
No,
extracranial.
I think Dr. Balasundaram wants to know
Yeah.
any lesion on the face, in the dangerous area of the face. They say there can be a spread to the sagittal sinus.
I don't have
See,
experience.
Can I answer?
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
See, like when this venous sclerotherapy is done, that's most of the time they block the outflows and they use a ring, and then it's done under image intensifier and everything. They'll see it; it's not leaking anywhere. That's when we started our interlesional sclerotherapy, we started with alcohol, absolute alcohol. That we have stopped. Now, most of the time we use STS, which can be used if you obstruct the outflows.
The next question is, can we use sclerotherapy for limb malformations?
See, we have to.
Sir, you can
No,
continue,
well,
sir.
no.
Sir, you continue, sir.
No. Well, sorry.
No, sir. Actually, limb malformations, any residual small lesions, we advise foam sclerotherapy, sir. Following after excision, if the patient has residual lesions, any small lesions, we give foam sclerotherapy, sir. Over to you, sir.
Yes, that's fine.
Sir.
Okay. The next question is, I'll start from the beginning. Vascular malformation of the gluteus area. If we ignore to do surgery, what complication is there? Dr. Prasanna Ji has asked.
Actually, gluteal region patient has severe pain while whenever she sits and walks, taking heavy weights on the hip, and so we advise surgery for the patients for excision.
Yes. And Dr. Ashish sir, you have anything to say on that?
That's again, I'll stick to that. See, that person has asked the question whether gluteal malformation she should have or she could have treated as a conservatively. Gluteal malformation, first we have to again think about it's whether it's AVM or venous malformation. If venous malformation, we could have treated conservatively, because see, many times that we have to see how close we are going to sciatic, what's the risk involved. If it's a superficial subcutaneous plane, easily can be removed. But if it's a deep-seated going into involving the muscle and everything, we have to weigh the risk and benefit. And this patient again can be benefited by giving this low molecular weight and other thing, heparin and other thing. The second thing is about if it is AVM of gluteal region. See, again, there's a big controversy. If you go through the literature, there's a big controversy. Some people say till it's really symptomatic, you should not do anything. Some people say you should do early in the stage 2 itself. One is a radiological diagnosis. So there's almost majority, or you can say 50-50 opinion is there, that AVM should be touched only when you think you can remove completely. Otherwise, it should be touched only if you if it's asymptomatic. It should not be touched if you think you can't remove completely and if it's asymptomatic. That's
nice. Thank you, sir. And there's another question I think Dr. Ashish Gupta can answer. Do you find any association with D-dimer values and fibrinogen values in venous malformations and the prognostic factors, prognosis?
See, now this new literature is coming. Yes, if D-dimer and fibro is high and fibrinogen is low, this not very good prognosis, treatment wise. And then it has we are investigating almost, we are doing the study almost like this. At this moment, we are doing D-dimer for all venous malformations and fibrinogen level. See, even our friends are not believing that radiologists many times, but D-dimer is important before any intervention is done. It's very important. And if D-dimer is high, especially more than 2 times, sclerotherapy and surgery should not be done without putting patient on low molecular weight heparin.
Okay, sir. And I think we have just about 2 minutes more. And there is one more request from Dr. Ravish. He wants you to share the slide showing indication for low molecular weight heparin and D-dimer.
Okay, I'm not very good at such slide share. Yes. See, this is, I think he wanted to know
Yes.
pain with three-fold increase in D-dimer, low molecular weight heparin, D-dimer level greater than twice, with low fibrinogen means less than 1. Then this patient should be put on low molecular weight heparin for 2 weeks before and 2 weeks after. Once D-dimer decrease and you can give a pressure garment and everything, then this can be stopped depending on that how the D-dimer and fibrinogen level is going.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. I hope that answers your question, Dr. Ravish. You can stop sharing screen, sir. We will, if you permit, we can wind up this first session. Sir.
Yes. Thank you very much, and Karthikeyan and Vallarmati.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank
sir.
you very much. And Karthikeyan is a very good initiative. Very good initiative. And thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, can you just stop share, sir? Yeah, thank you, sir. So now we will go. Thank you very much, Dr. Vallarmati, for a nice talk about vascular malformation. It's always a very confusing issue. And I think today, between you and Dr. Ashish Gupta, Dr. Ashish Gupta has cleared up a lot of cobwebs in our brain about vascular malformations. Thank you very much, sir, for your time and your moderation.
Thank you very much.